few years ago, when my daughter was a toddler, my wife and I used to take her to a nearby lake to picnic, swim, and just unwind. It was a peaceful spot, quiet, not too crowded, the kind of place where you could easily forget about the world for a while. One afternoon, after we'd finished eating, my wife decided to go for a quick swim while I stayed on the beach with our daughter. I watched her wade out into the water, the sun sparkling off the surface. A minute later, she suddenly stopped and turned to me, shouting something. At first, I couldn't make out what she said, but her expression was off. Then I heard her clearly. "I think I just stepped on someone's face." I froze for a second, thinking maybe she was joking. But the look on her face wasn't playful. It was pale, almost terrified. She quickly started making her way back to the shore, her legs moving faster, like she couldn't get out of the water fast enough. When she got back to me, she was visibly shaken. She said that while she was swimming, her foot brushed against something soft, and at first she thought it was a rock or a weird patch of seaweed. But when she pressed her foot down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the water, a nose, an eye socket. She swore she felt the hollow of the eye. I considered going in to check it out, but something stopped me. The unease in my gut, maybe. We decided to pack up and leave right after that. The next day, the local news reported that a young boy who had been missing for days was found drowned in that same lake, not far from where we had been. He'd been there the whole time, just beneath the surface. To this day, my wife is convinced she stepped on his face. In 1978, 15-year-old Mary was hitchhiking. A man named Lawrence Singleton picked her up. He brutally S.A.'d her and eventually made her get out of the car. She planned to run, but he noticed and cut both her arms off. He threw her into a ditch and left her to die. She packed her stumps with mud to stop the bleeding and spent all night crawling out of the ravine. She eventually made it to the highway and started walking, naked and covered in blood. The first car that saw her sped away in fear. The second car was a couple on their honeymoon. They picked her up, and she wound up surviving. She acted as a critical witness against Singleton. After serving 8 years for the crime, he was released from prison on good behavior. Upon his release, he later murdered Roxanne Hayes, a mother of 3, on February 19, 1997. Police found him covered in blood after stabbing her in his new home. Emily's parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving her the house to herself. At 17, she welcomed the freedom, an evening of simple pleasures, dinner, her favorite TV shows, and an early night in her cozy bed. The house was quiet, its stillness amplifying the sounds of the surrounding woods. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. As she lay in bed, facing the wall, she started to drift off. Her room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the hallway nightlight, slipping through the crack beneath her door. The air was calm, almost too still, when she heard it, the soft creak of her closet door opening. Her breath caught in her throat. Her instincts screamed to move, to run, but instead, she froze. Somehow, Emily convinced herself to feign sleep. Her heart thundered in her chest as the quiet rustle of footsteps approached. She could feel someone standing over her. A rough hand brushed her hair and then her face. It wasn't hurried or clumsy. It was almost tender, a disturbing mockery of affection. She kept her eyes shut, her breathing steady, even as every nerve in her body screamed in terror. Seconds stretched into eternity, and then the weight of the presence was gone. She heard the faint sound of footsteps retreating, the soft click of the front door. She waited until she was sure the house was silent again, before bolting upright. Her shaking hands fumbled for her phone as she called her boyfriend, begging him to come over. Then, she dialed her parents, her voice trembling as she recounted what had just happened. Finally, she called the police. When they arrived, they began a thorough search of the house and the surrounding property. What they found was horrifying. In the wooded area behind the house, nestled among the trees, they discovered a makeshift camp, a small, grimy tent filled with stolen trinkets from her home. Among them were pieces of her clothing, personal items, and worst of all, a collection of videotapes. The tapes revealed a terrifying truth. The man had been entering the house for months, crawling in through an unsecured doggy door. He had filmed her as she slept, lurking in the shadows of her room, undetected. The man was arrested a few days later. He was a drifter, a stranger with no real connection to Emily or her family, except for his sick obsession. The incident haunted Emily for years, a chilling reminder of how close danger had been, hidden in the dark corners of her home.